Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Eilenberg, and I work as an account manager at APRA AMCOS, working closely with our writer members. We're all very excited to have you here with us today, and a warm welcome to everyone who's here. I'm based in Melbourne. However, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be with you all here today on the lands of the Wiradjuri people on this wonderful country. It's an incredible feeling crossing over the Murray River and feeling familiarity in a place. I think of my past journeys and experiences on this country, which are always based around music, nature, stories, people, creativity, and connection. And I reflect on how the traditional custodians of the lands have been doing so on this country for more than 40,000 years. It's a privilege to be here as a guest on this land, witnessing its beauty and the care it has received over countless generations. I'd like to acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Wiradjuri people. I recognise their continuing connection to this land and pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people present here today. At APRA AMCOS, I am based within the Writer Services team, and in my role, I work directly with writer members. I help support creators by providing information on APRA membership, royalties, copyright, performing rights, industry advice and guidance. APRA AMCOS membership is free. If you have any questions about joining or wanting to discuss anything related to APRA, please feel free to come and see me later. I love talking about music, so please don't hesitate. We can speak later in the day or later at the networking drinks if you'd like to learn more. A lot of the services and regular help we provide can also be sorted in our handy app. Does anyone have the APRA AMCOS app? I see a few hands. Pretty sure? Great. Well, we've got one, and I'll tell you about it later. But the app makes managing your music admin royalty payments really easy. You can register your songs, submit live performance reports, and add your membership card to your phone's wallet, which is very handy if you're wanting to gain access to the free musician's baggage allowance on Qantas and Virgin. Wink, wink. Simply Google APRA AMCOS app in Google, and you'll be able to find the links to your preferred app store. We're here at the regional sessions to talk about art and the craft of songwriting and connection, but we also want to ensure that you have the tools at your fingertips to earn from your songs. So if you don't already, download the app. Welcome to the Regional Sessions New South Wales series presented by APRA AMCOS and proudly supported by Sound New South Wales with assistance from Music New South Wales. Albury is our final stop of the 5-event tour around New South Wales, and we're so excited to be wrapping up everything with you here today. Over the last week and a half, we've been to Lismore, Bellingen, Newcastle and Orange, and it's been a pretty inspiring ride so far. We created the regional sessions as a high-impact day to foster creativity, connections, and industry knowledge at a crucial time for anyone pursuing music. As the music industry continues to face adversity, the skills that go into writing the songs that connect and endure are more important and vital than ever. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We'll kick off shortly with our keynote presentation, followed by our panel discussion and then the workshop sessions in the afternoon. If you need the bathroom, just out this door to the left, down that way. You also have the event timings for the day on the back of your lanyards, and you can also find your workshop sessions there as well. We're lucky to have your local Music New South Wales regional coordinator with us here today, Kane Mills. Kane, where are you? Hand up. I'm going to embarrass you. If you haven't already booked an online for one-on-one session, I hear there's one left at 3 p.m, so you'll have to get in quick. Event staff can be identified by a black laminate, so please approach us if you need anything. And if you want to talk about APRA, it's free. You can speak with me or any APRA staff. I also encourage you to join us for the final session of the day at Beer Deluxe, the live performances and networking portion of our event. You can have a chat and debrief with fellow delegates and speakers and have a bite to eat and something to drink, which is all on us. So once you've finished your final workshop this afternoon, you can just wander on down and we'll kick that off at 5:30. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker and one of today's wonderful workshop mentors, Montaigne. Montaigne is one of Australia's most accomplished and eclectic music artists with award-winning work spanning the recording, theatre and games industry. Notable work includes representing Australia at Eurovision, collaborating with Austin Wintory and Tripod at the AGDA Game of the Year winning Stray Gods, and performing on viral hit Red Flags with Tom Cardy, among many more things which I'm sure will be discussed during this chat. Montaigne has released 2 brilliant singles late last year, Everybody Else and Talking Shit, and I highly implore you to have a listen. As a fan, I find them to be an inspiring, independent artist who connects through honest songwriting, vulnerability and activism. Speaking with Montaigne today is Josefina Fuamoli. Josefina is an award-winning Samoan-Australian music journalist, broadcaster and content producer. Since 2020, she has worked in Australia and overseas markets, covering artists and events while championing Australian music, emerging artists, and above all, a more diverse and culturally enhanced music culture. She's also an industry speaker and facilitator, having appeared and hosted keynote discussions at events including Splendour in the Grass, Melbourne Writers' Festival, Melbourne International Film Festival, and Big Sound. Her work has been featured in titles including Rolling Stone Australia, Junkie, NME Australia, The Age, The Australian, and more, while she can currently be heard hosting weekly music interview show On The Record for ABC Pacific Radio Australia, as well as Sister Sounds, a dedicated radio show on the network to amplifying women's voices through the Oceanic region. You may have seen her recently pop up on ABC News Breakfast as a music news correspondent alongside Lucy Smith. Please welcome Josefina and Montaigne to the stage. And I'll leave it to you.
Whoop. Awesome. How's it going, everybody? Okay, I need like 10% more. How are we doing this morning? Thank you so much. Thank you for having us in your awesome city.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm glad that I get to leave Melbourne every now and again. Okay, before we get started, give me a hands up. We're all songwriters in here. Okay, cool. So you're at the right function. We love it. Well, we've got one of Australia's most dynamic songwriters and minds here with us. I know that Montaigne's going to be doing a workshop later on today as well, so make sure you use them as a sponge of knowledge, because your career experience is, again, it's so diverse, and I'm so glad that we get to dive in a little bit deeper with you today. Just to start, I mean, you've been in the music industry as a songwriter, as a performer for quite a number of years now, as a recording artist especially. But what I love is how you've been able to kind of carve out a lane of your own in the gaming industry as well as theatre. How would you describe your relationship to creativity now versus where it was when you first started?
I think I have a much more pragmatic relationship with creativity now. When I was young, I mean, I'm turning 30 this year, but when I was probably like 16, well, you know, a child until about like 24, my relationship was very like impulsive. Well, not impulsive, just to say that I created as like an outlet for, you know, things that were happening to me in my life, right? Like everything was very driven by like passion and fury and you know, a wellspring of emotion basically. When now I feel like I have endured and overcome many challenges in my life, and I can now sort of broach creativity with I guess a bit more like, it's not discipline, just I guess a bit more deliberate purpose. Now I get to choose what I'm writing about instead of like having it thrust upon me. Yeah, I guess. Like I just remember when I was like 18, 19, I was writing so many songs all the time. I was writing constantly. Like I would be walking between point A and point B, or like on the bus or whatever, and I would be like making little voice memo notes on my phone while I was on the bus, or when I was on a plane, like if I was touring or whatever, I'd always be writing and thinking about writing, where now it's like I have many other hobbies that consume my time, and so it's a bit less urgent now, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, you know, I think there's having other hobbies and having other ways of being mentally stimulated is so important to the overall creative process, right? Because it can be very easy to, for lack of a better term, get lost in the sauce of it. You know, that's how we endure. That's how we come up against writer's block. That's how we come up against creative blocks when we're trying so hard to create to a mold that we think we should be.
Yeah.
But having things that we like doing that is sometimes detached from the craft can often open your brain up to taking in more.
I agree. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of like having hobbies and other interests that aren't necessarily music. I think some people are capable of being driven entirely by music, and that's like kind of a superpower, I think. Well done to you if you can do that. But I very much am driven by like other media that I consume as well. I write a lot of songs about like video games I play, or like movies I watch, or characters I read about in books and stuff like that, which is has always been really important to me to just process life. But also I really like the activity of like world building and imagining, you know, weird situations, and that often ends up in my songs. And I think, you know, something that I've written a lot about in my life is my personal life, is like my family and my relationships and stuff like that. But there is an element of that becomes kind of like an anchor to that time or that memory sometimes. And so if you just have like a full catalogue of every hurt you've ever felt and you have to perform all those songs all the time, sometimes I think
traumatizing
it can kind of weigh you down in that thing. Yeah. So I think it's good sometimes to also have some songs that are not about you.
Totally.
So that, it doesn't have to, because everything comes from your perspective, right? It comes from your experience of the character or of the story that isn't necessarily your life. So it is always you, but I think it can be healthy to engage in other things and to forget about yourself for a moment just for your sanity.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that brings up something that I always think about whenever I talk to musicians, especially if they're releasing, like, it doesn't even have to be a deeply personal body of work. It could just be a song that maybe I can relate to emotionally. You know, songwriting there's so much emotional labor that gets poured into it. And I do feel like songwriters and musicians, that's often not acknowledged as much as it should be, because not only are you pouring yourself into the music, then you have to perform it. And it takes a certain amount of vulnerability and a certain amount of, like, I was kind of half joking when I'm like, you're re-traumatizing yourself, or you're having to transport yourself back to that time that as an audience, I feel like we don't give enough significance to. So for you as a songwriter, and especially if we can think back to, you know, you being a teenager and writing music at such a formative time of your life, not how easy was it, but like, were there certain tools that you had to employ to make sure that your heart and your brain were like safeguarded?
It's an interesting question. I feel like the answer is probably quite complex and maybe requires a lot of like contextual detail, but I'll do my best to keep it concise. I guess I didn't grow up in like a particularly safe household. Like I wasn't you know, it wasn't necessarily physically abusive, but it was not psychologically safe. And so songwriting was like a very important coping mechanism for me.
Yeah.
So that's where I put all of my feelings into a poetry that was abstract enough that like my parents wouldn't know I was writing about our relationship and the dynamics, right? So that in some ways, songwriting itself was the safeguard for me. But then also part of my experience with that stuff was like I was really trying to keep those songs private to myself, and my parents being not particularly interested in like my privacy and my ability to have things to myself would often like kind of raid my journal or my like phone or whatever for my voice memos and like the things that I was writing that then felt unsafe. So then there's like this level of like I guess after that I learned to like really like find hidden folders and shit like to like keep all my stuff. So you know, this is, you know, very particular to me and stuff. I'm sure other people might have had similar experiences, but I think what ended up happening with my songwriting was like I got good at doing it quietly, I suppose, which like is still sort of like of use today, not for the same reasons, but because like I live in an apartment block and like I can't belt in my apartment like when I have neighbors who are like trying to work from home and stuff like that. So and also I think gotten good at like writing in a way that's like cryptic enough to not have people know exactly what I am describing, but still get the emotional sense of the song.
Yeah. That can be a hard balance as well, right? Yeah.
Well, because I Twitch stream as well. Like I will Twitch stream music production live to an audience who's chatting to me, and like I'll be writing this song, and sometimes the thing on top of my mind is like very personal and something I don't necessarily want people to know, but I'm also like live making a song in front of fans and people, and like so I've gotten quite good as well at like saying what I mean without saying what I mean, and there is a fine balance there, but I think if you can get there, it's kind of like a superpower a little bit. I think it's also helpful because if we songwriting can be quite universal or very specific and personal. And I think what you learn is how to make it both universal and personal.
And personal at the same time.
Yeah.
You touched on production, which is something I definitely want to get into with you. But before we do, are there any like budding or developing producers here? Awesome. Because that's, again, something that I'm fascinated by as somebody who is not technically musically talented in any, that's why I write about it, in any shape or form, but I'm fascinated by the creative people who can songwrite but can also hear the vision of a song as a producer. Like, can you take us through a little bit through your creative process when you're coming up with like the foundations of a song as a lyricist, but also, like you were saying before, building the world, building the sonic world?
Yeah. Nowadays, the way I wrote songs when I was like in my early 20s versus now is very different because I used to play guitar and piano a lot, and that's how I wrote my songs, just on guitar and piano at home. And now I'm very much straight into a DAW or a DAW, and I use Ableton, so I go straight into like laying down sounds and stuff like that when I'm making a song. So yeah, very much nowadays. Sometimes it'll start with like a lyrical idea I have or melodic idea, but oftentimes it'll just be me like messing with a synth loop or something that I then process the heck out of, and it sounds nothing like it originally sounded, but it sounds cool now. And then just like improvising basically over that vocally or something like that. But yeah, I like doing it that way because every session I've ever done with a producer has been those two elements happening simultaneously, like the producer working on the sounds and then me responding in the moment to the sounds that they are producing. And I do think that like sound does dictate emotion or mood or the what's the word? The like tone of the song. Like it's really interesting. There's like a new God, what's her name? I think it's Gracie Abrams. There's a new... sorry, it's Addison Rae. There's a new Addison Rae song that I heard for the first time on the radio yesterday, and I was like, I'm listening to the lyrics of this song and they do not match the sound of the song. It's that song High Fashion. And it's funny because the lyrics are kind of like really cheeky, but then the song is kind of this like sexy sounding, like smooth synthy pop thing. I was like, this should have been way weirder than it sounds, and I do think there is a connection between lyrics and sound that really make a song work. Like when you listen to like Bittersweet Symphony or whatever, and like those big sweeping orchestral strings, and it's the sort of like pop rockness of it, and the way he's talking or the lyrics he's written and stuff like that feel very like a person who's reckoning with their life and stuff, and it all like works, and that's why that's such an amazing song, right? Like I think the best songwriters do that. So I think like starting with the sound or understanding the sounds that you're working with and then matching the lyrics and the melody to the world you're building is like very important. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, it leads into a question I wanted to ask about your experience in creating music for games, for video games. Grammy nominated over here. What is that? How do those two creative processes differ? Like, is writing for soundtracks or, you know, essentially scoring a broader story that might not necessarily be one that has been born of your own head, is that different to how you would approach making an album?
Yes and no. It's different in that, like, obviously when you are commissioned to make a work for someone, it's their brief and their story, so you're working towards that instead of originating those ideas yourself. You're still originating ideas, you're still trying to figure out how to marry this with that, but like it's sort of their world that you're trying to fit into. I find that way easier than making music for myself, because you have a foundation to start from. And you know, what I was doing with Stray Gods, that game I worked on last, was mostly top line writing, like lyrics and melody, and there was a composer who was giving me like piano instrumentals to work off of. And yeah, I don't know, it was like in some ways easier because I was like, well, I got to write about like Orpheus and Eurydice, and like, because it was a Greek modern retelling Greek game sort of thing. And but then I guess the challenge there is I would send things off to David Gator, who is like the lead writer of the thing, and he'd be like, Orpheus would never use a modern word like that. Right. So then I would have to be like, okay, so I have to consider like the voice of Orpheus, and he's kind of like a guy who speaks really archaically, and he's like kind of a bit pretentious, right? So you have to, but then like you get that feedback and then you just do it and then it's fine. That's kind of easy. And then with music itself, so I'm composing on another game now, and now I'm doing the music, and there's no lyrics, there's no top line. Yeah. And that is not so different from making an album because, well, again, it's like the directors are giving you the inspiration, the genre, how they want the world to sound and feel. So for this game specifically, it's like a space heist game, and it's inspired by games like, the music is inspired by like Persona 5 and Cowboy Bebop and this, it's sort of like the new jazz funk sort of thing. And so I just made a playlist of like all the references they gave me, and then like kept listening and adding new things that I found from other media into that playlist, and I just listened to it heaps. And then when I finally got to the creation process, I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna like more or less like copy some of the ideas that I've listened to in that thing, and then they're going to become their own thing as I keep working away at this. And then you make a song, and then it sort of just happens as you keep experimenting. And that's kind of like how it is to make an album, because I do a similar thing. I'll just make a playlist of everything that I want the album to sound like, and then I'll sort of just like be like, okay, so like they use vibraphone in this song, I kind of want that feeling in my song, so I'll get a vibraphone thing out, you know, and just do that. So that's kind of
similar.
Yeah, similarities there. It's just like a lot of exploration and experimentation to mood board, to basically. Get to that point, yeah.
And in that sense, then, like, when do you know a song is done?
I just know. Like, sometimes
Trust your instinct.
Sometimes I'm just like, well, that feels good to me. You know what I mean? I think I understand that a lot of people do struggle with knowing when something is done, but I unfortunately can't speak much to that experience, because usually I'm just like, well, that's it. Well, that's done.
Are you the sort of are you the sort of creative, or I guess writer? Like, I know when, like, if I'm in the middle of a project, or if I'm writing, because I've been doing it for so long now, I'm like, and it's something I'm really trying to break out of, because I feel like it's kind of detrimental to my process. But I find that I edit myself as I'm going, just because you're so used to the craft of getting it done. Yeah. As a songwriter, do you find that that's a trait that you've come across?
Yes. I think the difference between like your writing and my writing is just that like mine is way shorter. Like like songwriting songs, there's not a lot of words or lyrics or anything in them. Like, it can be. Like, there are definitely songs, there's definitely music that are very wordy, Bob Dylan songs. But like generally I do less editing just because there's less to edit, right? And so I don't know, I think I also often trust whatever's coming out of my mouth, and I might make edits like later down the track, like a few days or a few months later. Like there's songs I've written like one verse of, and I kind of like that, but then like I didn't know how to progress it, and then a year later I'm like, oh yeah, this was kind of cool, and then for whatever reason, like my brain is now capable of finishing this song. And yeah, I guess like also because editing might be more like a lot to do with like rhyming, right? It's like, I could actually like rhyme something better in that spot that progresses the song and the imagery of the song a bit better, sort of thing. And that is, that's not always like a in the moment process. It might be like, a few days later.
Yeah, further down. I think it's such an important note that you bring up. You know, it's something that I've come across in conversations that I've had with musicians of all different levels, like solo artists, bands as well. Like I interviewed a band last week who are working on a new album at the moment, and the frontman was saying, you know, there are some songs on this album, they're like 8 albums in, right? Stems and lyrical ideas for songs that they'd written like 10 years ago that are now coming back in, and they're just like, at the time we were like, what the heck are we doing? We can't do anything with this. But now it's weirdly taking on a new life 8 albums later. And they're just like, and he said to me, he's just like, there was part of me that thought it's too old, it sounds too recycled, I want to ditch it, but there was just something that kept bringing me back. And I feel like that's okay. You know, like if there are just different ideas that you don't know what to do with, it's okay to park them, because if they're meant to grow into something naturally, they will happen. You just got to let it happen at its own time.
Exactly. I think like, there's so much shit I've written in my whole life that like just is on the cutting room floor. And, you know, I think sometimes I do, occasionally I don't go back into my archive so much anymore because I am making new stuff regularly. But sometimes, you know, every 6 months I'll be like, what was I doing? And have a look, and there will be like a line here or an image here that I'll salvage, or like, even some whole songs where I'm like, actually, that was pretty good. Maybe I should do something with that. But nothing wrong with going back, I don't think. I
agree. Before we move on to, because I want to talk to you a bit about collaborations as well, just to think about the last few years for you, now working more in the gaming side of things while also still creating your own music. Like, what has it been like to bring a love of music and then a love of games together? Because it's rare that we're able to fuse two things we really love like that. It's been really awesome. I was like a frustrated gamer growing up because my dad was like an athlete and my mum didn't really care for games and was very much more on the like, you should go play outside kind of angle. So like I really wanted to play video games growing up, and my parents allowed me to a little bit, and like the games I played was like Spyro and Crash Bandicoot and Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy X and like lots of RPGs and some platformers and stuff. But those things really inspired me, and I was so into them, the sort of small pool of games I ever did and was allowed to play. I always wanted to play more and couldn't, and then like I guess when the pandemic happened, I was like, I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want, and I'm gonna buy a bunch of video games and play them all day, and that was awesome. So I really like got to reconnect and connect, I guess, with my inner child who really loved video games, and now I'm like so deep into the world of it. And at some point, I think 2021 or 2022, I was like, I would love to work on video games and do the music for them, because I just love video game music, and was lucky enough to get the call from Stray Gods or from Summer 4 Studios who needed a songwriter. It's awesome, because I think also like I wasn't always a producer or composer. Like I was mostly a songwriter and a top line writer and stuff like that. And so, you know, there's a question of like, can I do it? Like, do I have the ability? But since 2020, like I've been in Ableton Live and I've been producing a bunch, and I was really shit for a very long time. And then like suddenly in 2023, I was like, oh, I actually like know how to make a song now. That's like cool. And so being able to exercise that ability now and bring my own unique flavor to it as well. Because I think I have relatively
different taste to a lot of people, or at least, you know, unique taste. I think a lot of people have unique taste, but I think like I very much like the stuff I listen to is across a very broad and also very targeted and niche spectrum sometimes. And so it's fun to be able to bring my sound to these kinds of things and to people who like really appreciate it because they're not musical at all. So they're like, you're like a wizard. They hear what you make and they're like, how did you even do that?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. I guess I am a wizard.
I guess
anyway,
I am a genius.
yeah, exactly. And so it's like awesome working for game developers because they think you're amazing.
There's such a big industry in that for musicians and for songwriters. Like you mentioned games like Persona 5 and Cowboy Bebop and stuff like that. I know a lot of Australian musicians who've like decamped to Japan, a lot of jazz musicians, shock, who are making more money doing sessions for games than they are actually gigging musicians because there's just so much work in that. And also they get to have a lot of fun with it because they're music nerds, you know what I mean? Which is not a bad thing. I think it's, if anything, it's proving that you can take your passions for different things and there is a space to let that flourish, you know?
Yeah.
Especially for young songwriters too.
Yeah.
I do feel like that there still is a perception of like the path you need to take to achieve some level of success or fulfillment. But as you're proving, your fulfillment is coming from things that you intrinsically love doing off stage as well.
Yes. I'm a big proponent in 2025 of like figuring out exactly what it is you like and then figuring out what the path for that is because like I think, you know, when I was growing up and I kind of got rushed into like signing with a label and management and stuff like that, didn't know what I was doing. My mum didn't know what she was doing. And like, I very much kind of just like was expected to want what my mum wanted for me which was to like become Taylor Swift level of successful.
Sure.
Which like, I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy because that seems really intense and tough and you have to give up a lot to get there. But I didn't know that when I was young, and so I fumbled a lot through my career from like, you know, age 18 to 25 even, being like with the label system and trying to fit into the label system and be what they wanted me to be while also trying to be myself because I'm also very stubborn. And it wasn't working. And I, you know, it was working enough that I now have a career, but it wasn't working enough that I would have a career with them for another 10 years. You know, it's like, it was a good start, but like, it was not a space I was suited to. And the reason for that is because like, I started to discover that I liked a lot of different things musically. I really wanted to do things for video games. I was starting to be commissioned to like do some songwriting for like theatre productions and I was Twitch streaming and I was just doing all this different stuff that like my management and the labels didn't understand and also actively undermined because like a local Australian solo game developer would like hit me up, be like, hey, I have like $4,500 for you to do like 4 songs for my tiny game that only I am working on and there's like no budget. And I would be like, that sounds great. Like $4,500 for work that will probably be quite quick for me and that, you know, I'm happy to just get my foot in the door in the games industry.
That's how you
and
build.
I'd say to my management, I want to do this. And then they would be like, they're not paying you enough money. The label won't get a big enough cut. You can't do that. And I was like, that's stupid because I'm not going to get booked by a AAA tomorrow. I haven't like done any, a AAA was just like a massive major studio that has like millions of dollars in their budget. And yeah, I don't have the experience or whatever. And so like, you know, very shortly after that, I like left my management, left my label. And then I started getting booked to this game, which again, isn't like a huge amount of money, but like if this game does well,
it can lead to more.
Precisely. And I can release the original soundtrack and I can collect royalties off of that. And if it becomes like a cult hit, something like Cult of the Lamb or Journey or like Untitled Goose Game, all these things have like a crazy life. And then you get like gallery in Acme for the game and everything you worked on, and it's like all these things can spring up, but like labels really don't understand like the longevity of these opportunities and what these can mean, because all they care about is reaping the rewards of your recorded solo or like band music or whatever, which is also very exploitative, by the way. And yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say is like, I have now discovered after like doing the label thing, having managers, which were important parts of like learning what my path is. Like maybe I would never have gotten to knowing myself and knowing what the paths there are without the label, without the management, right?
Yeah.
But I'm, you know, now I have a Patreon, and I don't earn like enough money to like cover my entire career right now, but I'm going to grow that over time by connecting directly with my fans and also like working on video games, and hopefully maybe I'd love to do more theatre, and I'd love to maybe get into like TV and film scoring as well if that's possible, and all this stuff, just like growing my portfolio, my reputation, so that people know I can do the job and I'm not just like a vapid singer-songwriter or whatever.
Totally.
And so yeah, I think like what I'm just trying to say is like maybe a lot of you just sort of want the recording music career and want to be like, I'm trying to think of, well, like, I don't know, Thelma Plummer, Greta Ray, or Lime Cordiale, or like, you know, all these Australian artists that are doing really well and that are just doing recording music and touring and stuff like that. But if there are other things you want to do, I would encourage you to like pursue them as well, because I still make my recording music in my way and also do all that other stuff. And I figured out like how to like fit all that other stuff into my life without also overloading myself and like
or without having to like sacrifice your own mental safety, but also without having to sacrifice the things that you actually really like to do.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this as well is like I would advise finding this variety in a career if you enjoy those things, because the music industry in Australia is really small, especially the recording industry. I'm not gonna like create an illusion of like prosperity and growth in Australia because things are worse than they've ever been and getting worse. And I would like, as a sort of just like safety net for you, like doing work that isn't necessarily just recorded music, and like maybe like teaming up with someone to try to produce something for a bigger project. Well, when I say bigger project, I just mean something that isn't like an album, like something that has like a crew and a cast on it can be really awesome, because that there's more of that happening, and then that is paid and that isn't exploiting your rights than just like labels giving you heaps of money that you technically don't own outright. And like I, you know, just for context, I signed with Sony 12 years ago. And I still have not made a single cent of any of the music that I've ever released with them. Like I still owe them $50,000 of my royalties. So, and I'll probably recoup that in like 5-10 years or something like that. And then after that, I will start to make some money from the music, by which time they'll have already rendered my masters back to me because they just license it.
Yeah.
And I will just own it all anyway. So, but yeah. Yeah.
We can go into this more later as well, because it is such a complex conversation to be having that I don't necessarily think is being had with especially emerging songwriters, emerging producers as well. Like it's something that I think needs to change. So like I love that you're comfortable enough to be so candid. Because it feels like what we were talking about just before is like sometimes we need to almost go through things to obviously learn from them, but in doing that, you know, we're holding a door open so that more people can come through, and they don't have to go through as much as you did, or, you know, artists who came before you did as well. Yeah. Just building that community around you is so important.
Yeah, communicating about these things is really important, because I don't know, I'm not a gatekeeper type person. I'm very much like people should have wisdom and knowledge and information. to help them through their
Yeah.
lives, you know.
Totally.
And you
And
will encounter a lot of people in the music industry who are gatekeepers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
who do want to close the door behind them and do not want to help others and stuff like that, which is really shitty and sucks, and I don't like it, and I don't associate with those people. But I highly recommend like having these conversations with like your community and people around you and other songwriters, because everyone's going through it.
Totally.
Like, and the only people who are not going through it and the ones who do shut the door are the ones who have managed to be lucky enough to like crack it into a full-time gig, really successful, like good streams or whatever. I guess, I want to say, like, if you do also ever get lucky enough to hit that, like, don't be like them. like help the people.
Just don't be shit.
Give a hand up to people who are also trying. You know what I mean?
Don't be shit.
Yeah.
Community and collaboration is something that I thought would be, again, I'm interested in getting your perspective on, but I think for, everyone in this room living regionally as well, and also being creative, there are always going to be roadblocks that come with that. Like, I come from a smaller town as well. I lived up in Darwin for 10 years, so like you feel quite cut off from a broader scene and community. But I think now more than ever, there are so many ways to form community, to form collaborative relationships when you don't even have to be living in the same space. Montaigne has so many really, really cool freaking collaborations that have marked your career, from working with people like, the Hilltop Hoods, mentioned just before, Tom Cardy in the comedy space, David Byrne as well. Like the variety this person has been involved in has been awesome. Just on a collaborative front though, like you yourself as a writer and as an artist, like, do you find yourself to be like a collaborator who, when you're involved in these projects, like it comes easy? Like how easy is it for you to sort of just let yourself go and be part of the process?
When it comes to my own music, I'm pretty what's the word? I guess stubborn about things sounding a certain way. But the only way I've collaborated on my own music with other people is by like mostly having the track ready there and being like, hey, do you want to write some lyrics for a part that you sing, and just plug you in there, kind of thing. So that kind of makes it a bit easier.
Makes it a little easier to do.
Though, like, I don't know. We were talking earlier about Nick Ward. He's like a sort of up and coming artist, and I met him a few years ago, and I was like a fan of what he was doing, and I was like, I have this song that I haven't finished. Like, do you want to be on it? And it was like a song that had production, first verse, first chorus, second verse, but no top line, and then just sort of faded out. I was like, do you want to do something like that, like finishes the song? And I just sent it to him, and he sent back like a full sort of like bridge to chorus, like production recorded song written thing that just sounded so awesome. And I was like, perfect, that's a song. And that was super easy, but it was easy because I think Nick has really good taste. You know what I mean? It's like, I think what's really important about collaboration is like picking someone whose taste you trust.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I think it can be good to sort of just like, especially if like options are scarce, to just be like, hey, let's try and work on something together, because that can be an awesome learning experience. But I think like the best situations come out of finding someone who you're like, I think the things you like and the things that you have made are really awesome and aligned. Exactly. Like, yeah, I wouldn't reach out to like, I'm trying to think who, I don't know, like, I wouldn't reach out to like, that's actually really funny, because I feel like I could align with a lot of people.
I could.
I would reach out to like maybe Phoebe Bridgers, as much as I love her and like her, and be like, want to write a song together, because I think our stars are really different.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you wanna reach out to someone who you're like, I think what we would make together, and it can be different. Like, there are some people I've worked with, like there's this Japanese woman named Michael Lubte who I made a song with her, and she mostly does sort of like synth dance music with like a bit of songwriting, but it's very much in the dance sort of space and electronic space. But I'm just a big fan of her music, and I think the songs were really good and the songwriting was really good. So I was like, hey, want to sing on my song or want to make something together? And like we started that relationship. It's really cool. But yeah, I think like it's important to whoever you're working with to just be like, yeah, the trust of taste.
Yeah.
Taste is really important, I think.
Totally. You live in Sydney.
Yes.
Soon to be joining the ranks of the best city in the world, which is Melbourne. No, but we were to that point. We were talking earlier about how it's easier for you to move around because you don't necessarily need to be tethered to Sydney to be creative and to make music. From your experience, what advice would you give to our lovely artists in this room who may feel slightly stifled in thinking, okay, I can only go so far with music being where we are now. Still close to major cities, but maybe still locked off from touring opportunities or, developing our craft in that way. What advice would you give?
I feel like it's tough to give advice when I haven't necessarily
been
in the same position.
You, but I guess maybe like from a creative standpoint, like how have you found it in terms of developing your own craft, reaching out to people who may not live near you or, who might be like, oh, that person's really cool. I don't know how to approach them.
Yeah. I think firstly, if you want to reach out to other people, they will be more receptive if you do have work out there that they can reference. Like, so you've got to start putting yourself out there basically and releasing your music, because I chat to my partner about this all the time. He's a comedian and a songwriter and a producer, mostly like writes comedy music and for people and trying to sort of do his own stuff. And he's always like very frustrated with the industry, as he has every right to be because it sucks. But he's always like, people aren't noticing me, or like, like people that I do work with, like I feel like they don't consider me as like an individual creating my own right. I'm like, my love, like you don't put anything out there.
Sure.
Like they don't consider you because there's nothing there to consider. Yeah. Like you haven't put your work out there, so they don't know how to assess you because there's nothing to assess. You know what I mean? So I think like actually putting stuff out is like a very important first step, and like it might not be your best work ever, but you got to start doing it. And also the more you do it, the better you get at it as time goes by, hopefully. Like I think most people are good at learning from like the work that they create.
Totally, yeah.
But so that's an important part, is like the finding the courage to like actually put yourself out there, which is really scary and really hard. But let me tell you, the more you do it, the better you get at it, and the easier it becomes, which is what I experienced when I first started doing music when I was like 17 or 18 or whatever. Like, in the public eye, I was like scared shitless. Like I was not into it, and I was like, do I even want to do this? But then, after doing a few gigs and stuff, I was like, you know what? Okay, it's fine. I will be able to do it. I'm still nervous, but like I'll get there. And now I have literally no fear going on stage.
Yeah.
Like,
do you remember, was there like a particular point in your career, or, not asking you to pinpoint a gig or like a specific year, but do you remember there being a turning point where you're like, actually, I don't want to vomit when I go up on stage. I don't have crippling anxiety as much. Or if I do have anxiety, I know how to deal with it for the half an hour, 40 minutes I'm there.
Honestly, I think it was probably like couple of years ago that I realized like, oh, I really am not afraid anymore. And I think part of that was just like doing this career for so long, but also like it was just me coming into my own as a person, just in my personal life. Like I had made a lot of really hard decisions, but that were like kind of proof of the agency I had claimed for myself. And after going through all those experiences, I was like, oh, I know how to like stand up for myself now, and my sense of self is really good. And so like going up on stage, I was like, oh, this is kind of the same as that, but instead of people in my life that I know that are really hard to deal with, this is like a group of strangers who are here to, in some ways, assess me. A lot of people are there to just enjoy.
Yeah.
But like some of them are going to be there to judge. And now I'm like, oh, I'm not afraid of the judgment anymore, which is nice. So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And it's proof in the pudding that like it doesn't matter how many years into this you are. You can still have those moments of like self-doubt or
100%.
like questioning things.
Yeah.
But there is no set time frame of when that will stop, or there is no set time frame of when, that's just not a thing anymore.
Robbie Williams on his press tour for Better Man is like, I'm anxious every single time I get out there. And he still puts his whole soul and self into being on stage and stuff like that, even though he's about to vomit every single time he gets up there. But yeah, sometimes it never does get easier.
Totally.
Sometimes it does get easier. I guess it's maybe hope for some people who are wondering.
I feel like if you're getting out there and you're not having like that visceral connection to something that you have made, then you got to look inward at that point, right? Like, be like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I think maybe there's another like question to be asked there as well, where it's like, I mean, I think for me, it's just like I think my superpower is being vulnerable. Like that's just something I've been able to do since I was very young, and that again comes from the material conditions of my childhood, which is like I had parents who were like, you have to keep the family secrets, and I was like, I have to not tell people all the bad shit that's happening to me. Like I'm not fucking doing that. It's like, and so almost like sometimes like my ability to be honest with people, my vulnerability is a response to my parents being like, don't do that. I'm like, well, fuck you. I'm not doing that. Not doing that. Anyway, so like, but there is a thing of, my music is vulnerable and I can be vulnerable on stage quite comfortably and quite readily. But there is like, I think for most people, if you do not feel vulnerable on stage because your music is not particularly vulnerable, and this probably doesn't matter much for like, say, like, music that isn't meant to be passionate and emotive and personal and stuff like that, like, maybe that doesn't matter. But if that's the music you're making and you don't feel squirming on stage, then maybe it's like, oh, maybe the music, you need to be a bit more vulnerable with your music, like you're saying. It's like maybe this is something to be thought about with your songwriting and whether or not you are genuinely putting yourself out there, because that can be really important with songwriting. Like people connect to something that is real and felt. And it's like, you guys as songwriters, you're in such a unique position as artists where you're creating the art, but you're also active listeners and consumers of it as well. Like we're all here because we love music, I hope. So it's like you've got that unique perspective of like knowing how music hits you when you listen to it, knowing how you experience it in a live room, and then being like, well, I want to evoke that feeling in my own music as well. So yeah, I think there is something in that of being like, to what you were saying before, finding what you really like and what you're passionate about, and finding that path to sort of achieve that, but also to amplify that in a way that feels more comfortable to you too. Yeah. I just want to go back to the collaboration thing really quickly, because I feel like I like verged off the path really wildly. But so yeah, like obviously the first thing is like being brave and putting things out there. But also I guess like when you reach out to people, because it's very easy to reach out to people nowadays on like social media and stuff. And a lot of like really fruitful collaborations do happen just from like a cold reach out with like a community online, like either through SoundCloud or like Tumblr or Bandcamp or whatever, like just social media and stuff. And I guess like there's so much opportunity. There's also a lot of potential for rejection, and this is something everyone goes through.
Everyone will go through it.
I have gone through so many rejections that some that are really embarrassing, that like sometimes I lie awake at night and think about them, but like we all go through it. But it's important to try, if you do want to collaborate with other people and create community, because one, you will learn something from every rejection that you experience, whether it be like, okay, maybe they weren't the right person for this, that, or the other
Yep.
reason, or like maybe there was something in my approach that I need to modify or improve or whatever. Like that's a really important process, I think. Yeah, again, there are some that I'm like, oh my God, why did you say that? That's insane. Anyway, like it's something we all go through. But then eventually you might find
hit on
the
something really
person
cool. Yeah.
that like you end up making heaps of stuff with, and that like that becomes a really cherished relationship. Maybe it doesn't last forever, but maybe it leads you to a lot of new things in your life. So like I would highly advise it. The internet's as shitty as it can be sometimes, is sometimes really awesome for
tool.
connection as well. And you know, even TikTok, it's interesting, like because I'm pretty siloed as an artist. Like I'm a very introverted person. I don't really belong to a music community. Like most of my friends are in comedy. I have friends in the scene and stuff, but I don't like talk to them regularly and like all that stuff, right? And a lot of the way that I discover music is like through you know, YouTube, or like I use Spotify Discover Weekly, and if I like a song, I'll go to the album and listen to that album, and I'll be like, oh, I like that artist, and listen to the rest of the stuff. I also find a lot of stuff through TikTok, and it's like not just like the huge stuff, but I get served a lot of like people who are beginning their careers and starting to post on TikTok and stuff. And there's a lot of people who are like, oh, this is really good and this is really interesting, and they're like followed by so few people, and they're really just beginning. And like there are times where I'm like, oh, like I'm going to keep them in mind or save them just in case one day I want to reach out and be like, hey, do you want to like make anything? And I think that's like a really cool way to discover people you might be able to collaborate with, because there's so many people just like starting their careers who are, you know, posting for the first time and really might be open to connecting with other people about music, because honestly, like the more connection, I think the better in 2025.
Absolutely.
So that you can, I think it's a way to combat like the domination of like labels and stuff like that, and just because they have just so much money, all the power, all the resources to push the artists that they sign into the public sphere. And I think the way that indie artists rise is like, you know, rising tide lifts all boats, helping each other and connecting. And like, you know, a lot of people's strategies nowadays are like putting out a lot of songs with like features or multiple artists on that song, so that they expose each other to each other's audiences.
Everyone's
you know,
getting it.
Precisely. So that I recommend. I don't know. Like the internet it can be a good thing.
Yeah, it can be a good thing. Like all, but again, there's two sides of every coin, right? Before we get into like our little wrap up, does anyone have any questions, comments, affirmations? Oh, okay. We'll start with the lovely lady at the back.
You talked a lot about how you know when a song is finished. But what about, I don't know about other artists here, but I have a whole note section of many unfinished songs. What do you recommend for like finishing off a song when it's half finished and you don't really know what to do with it?
Yeah, I have a lot of these as well. I definitely have way more songs that are unfinished than finished. A lot of them just like never get finished. Like I'm just like, well, it's not happening. Like I haven't figured out how to advance this, and I don't feel it in me to want to try. So like they just get left. There's been some stuff where they have gotten finished, and honestly, like time has been a big factor. Is just like leaving it for a long time. Then when I come back to it, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That's like just been sitting in my subconscious long enough that I now know how to finish, or you know, the experience I've accrued over the last year or whatever, how long I've put it down for, has allowed me to like know how to finish a story or whatever. So yeah, I guess we were talking about like writer's block and like, you know, blocks to creativity and stuff like that. And my thing is always like, don't fret over it. Like if it needs time, give it time. I'm a huge believer in like not banging your head against the wall to try to finish something. I think like Porter Robinson, who's like a producer and songwriter I really admire, he was talking about his album Nurture a few years ago on this radio show, and he was saying like he went through like a 7-year depression because he released his album Worlds, which is like a massive success right off the bat. Like he was really surprised. And then everyone expected him to have this big follow-up second album. And so he just like went to the studio and tried to make songs, and everything he made was like total garbage. And he was like, okay, well, I have to try harder. So the thing he started doing was seeing friends less, seeing family less, going out less, watching fewer movies and TV shows, reading fewer books. He just was in the studio all the time. And he got so madly depressed and nothing he was making was good. And this was like for years. And then one day he just like hit a breaking point and he was like, you know what, I have to take a break. And as soon as he started living his life, he started to make beautiful music. He met his wife, like all this stuff
What happened?
Exactly, because basically he was like, I was able to make music once I started having experiences. You know what I mean? Like I was able to actually get on with it and make things that I really believed in and that came from the heart after experiencing the world. So honestly though, like a lot of that album is about him struggling with like creativity and working himself into this crazy depression and isolation and stuff like that. And maybe the album couldn't have happened if he hadn't like put himself through all of that. But I will say, like, save yourself a lot of pain and tears by like making something that is still really good that doesn't require you to drive yourself up the wall, I think. Like, yeah. So I think just like a bit of a break, watching or reading something, like just consuming fiction, I think is like a really good thing to do. Having, you know, being in your relationships, talking to people, hanging out with people, letting conflict arise, resolving the conflict, maybe not resolving the conflict ever and letting it hang eternally. like, you know, they're all things that allow you to finish a song, I think. Yeah.
What about yourself?
I was had sort of almost the opposite, which is like when you're starting and like I've written heaps of stuff that I'm so critical of that I never get to a point where I'm like, that's okay to actually put out. And I think like given how difficult it is now to like with the saturation of the market and everything, like when's the time where you kind of feel like, all right, this is good enough, I'll let this one get out?
It's a really tough question because I think like the voice in your head that does cripple you and that does provide the self-doubt can be really powerful. I think, again, I have a lot of conversations like this with my partner because he experiences a similar thing where he's like really worried that the thing he's making isn't good enough or that people are going to judge it or criticize it or like, you know, ostracize him because of it. And I think like the only answer really is like, you just have to do it anyway. Like, I think it might be the thing that the voice is always there, but you just have to punch through it, you know? Like, there've been so many times in my life as well where, like, sometimes with creative decisions where I've been like, I feel like people are gonna, like, not love this one or something like that, you know what I mean? Like people, or like
This might be the one.
yeah, but this is what is in my heart, and like, you know, I guess it's sort of different because that's not necessarily my own voice telling me that it's wrong or bad or whatever, but like the concern that other people are gonna think that. But like, I just sort of had to just like push through anyway and do it, because again, it's like if nothing ever gets out there, then nothing's ever going to happen, right? And like if the thing that does happen is that you get negative feedback, that is really scary. But also I think the thing I always try to remember is that often people who like say nasty things shouldn't be listened to. Like there is a cruelty within them that I don't personally understand and wouldn't want to associate with ever. And whenever someone says something that is like cruel or mean or rude, I'm like, I don't know what's going on with you that made you decide to make this choice, because everyone I know that like scrolls through YouTube or TikTok or whatever is just liking the videos they like and not leaving fucked up comments. You know what I mean? It's like, and so I just try to ignore the people that say that stuff because I think it's like really uncharitable and very morally questionable, and like they'll always be there as well, right? But there will always also be people silently or otherwise like trying to gas you up and really liking the thing that you like. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, because it feels like there is something very, you know, like there is a thing to be confronted with in you as regards your songwriting, right? Like a fear or insecurity and stuff like that, which is like totally normal as well, right? Like we all have that in us to varying extents, and especially with songwriting because it's so personal and so vulnerable. it's even scarier, right? But I think, my answer would just be that just do it anyway, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I sing country music and I also do stand-up comedy as well. And I can find that I can do the stand-up comedy with funny jokes and stuff.
Yeah.
But when I'm doing like when I'm writing as an artist, I always get criticised. Oh, you need to do a funnier song. You need to do that. I find like country music ain't country if it ain't hurting.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
relate to that.
Yeah.
How do I move forward from that? Like,
If I'm understanding correctly, like people are telling you the way that you should be writing.
don't write another bloody sad song. You know?
Yeah. Don't listen to
Don't
them.
listen to
There was this guy, there was this like quite successful producer when I was 16 who I did a session with. I was like signed to a publisher then, and they were putting me in sessions, and this guy who, again, quite successful, so he was an authority figure and I was 16, he was like 30 or something, so there's a big power difference there. And I was singing the way that I sing in the session, and he was like, you know, that Florence and the Machine thing's done. Like, we like, let's steer away from the big vocals thing. Like, it's so passé. And I was like, oh, okay. And that really affected me for so long. Like, that really stayed in my head. And ultimately, like, it was a stupid thing to say, because like Florence and the Machine also has continued to have a wonderful career singing exactly the way that she sings, and so many people have come through with massive voices that sing belty music. He just was going on some weird journey of his own about how music should be done, but he shouldn't have pushed that onto me, a person he just met, like that is 16, you know what I mean? And so what I would say with that stuff, people who really try to push into a certain direction, I think just like don't listen to them. Yeah nice. If you have
Facebook is you mentioned Facebook, that's it. That's a red flag for me anyway.
One of the most like precious things that we have as people is the instinct towards something, because a lot of people struggle with not knowing exactly what direction they want to go. And if you know you want to like write something slightly sadder, then take it and do it, because that's what's inside of you and you can see it, you know, and it's accessible. Like, I think just listen to yourself.
Like it didn't go too bad because I got number one on the top 30 country.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah, fantastic.
Yes.
There you go.
Congratulations.
There you go.
And where are they? In their Facebook community group.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do I have a couple more minutes to say one more thing? The other thing I want to say is like, I started in my career doing basically like indie pop music, and I still sort of do that, right? But like, the album that gave me my career sounded a very specific certain way, and I think everyone wanted me to continue making music that sounded like that because that was what worked, right? And my label probably wanted to, and my management did. And jump to like 2022, and my whole career is completely different. Like I've put out 2 more albums. They all sound really different from each other, and they're doing less and less commercial success over time. And initially I was like, I have failed at being like a singer-songwriter or musician somehow, like I'm not a commercial success. But what I realized was like, oh no, like I guess commercial success is not the metric I should actually be striving for. What I need to figure out is how to make successful the thing that I want to do and make. Because the thing I want to do and make is not commercial sounding music. I don't make music anymore that necessarily fits on radio, either Nova and all those ones, or Triple J even, or like whatever, right? Like I actually in my heart have become a person who makes weirder music, and I don't really want to sacrifice or compromise on that, right? So what I discovered was like I actually have to completely change the structure of my career in order to suit that, rather than change myself for them and to make them feel comfortable because they get to make $1 gajillion off of my album that I'm not making any money from. So that is something I would say to people as well, is like figure out, do you actually like want to crank out music that you kind of like but maybe don't necessarily like because you want the success and fame and stuff like that? Or do you want to be someone who lives in accordance and alignment with your own values and your own material reality and your brain? Because like, again, I can't imagine being someone like Taylor Swift level. I think it seems so stressful. Like I like going to the grocery store and getting my groceries and no one knows who I am, and like that's fine.
That's
You know what I mean?
okay,
It's
yeah.
like that stuff really works for me. So I think it's important when you are trying to strive for a career in music to figure out exactly how you would like to live in your life in like 10, 20 years. And that doesn't mean even necessarily like, yeah, that means stuff like, do I want to be able to go to the grocery store without getting a photo taken of me
Totally.
where I don't feel comfortable with the way I look and that gets plastered everywhere online and like, you know, all that stuff. So the end.
I think it's a fitting spot to finish on. Of course, like Montaigne's going to be meeting most, if not all, people in this room at the workshop later on. So if you've got any other questions for
Yeah.
Montaigne, we've got the whole day, people. But thank you so much, my love.
No worries.
So
Thank
fun.
you.
And thank you all for rocking up this morning. Like I said at the top of today's session, just immerse yourself as much as you can in the sessions you've got coming up and the meetings that you got coming up, because you've got some of Australian music's most creative minds here today. So thank you all. Thank you, APRA. Thank you, Tim. I think we're on time.
Nice.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Thank you so much, everybody.
That was amazing. Thank you. Keep it going. Thanks so much, Montaigne, Josefina. That was awesome. Yeah, really rang true that part at the end, particularly writing music for yourself. I think that's really important and not always feeling like you've got to fit in someone else's structure. So I definitely took that away. Okay, it's time for a break. We have got 15 minutes. Just go to the bathroom, get something to eat. There's tea and coffee. And we have a panel discussion kicking off in here at 11:30. So back in your seats at 11:30. Thanks.